Whenever we think of Halo's alien races, a specific weapon usually accompanies our mental image. The elites have their famous energy sword. Grunts have a needler or plasma pistol. Brutes? The mental image of a brute is usually paired with the ever-charismatic frame of a gravity hammer. It's a weapon that not just defines an entire enemy type in the series, but it's an icon of one of Halo's most successful side game modes, Griffball, spawning over a decade of cash money tournaments and enthusiastic players that still continue to play it to this day. Halo's gravity hammer is a weapon with an absolutely fascinating history, full of highs and lows, ups and downs, memes and dreams, or memes and dreames if you prefer. And like most weapons in the series, I thought it would be fun to take a look at each iteration of this large boy. As we go through the iterations of the hammer, comment below which one is your favorite and why. And with that being said, let's begin. And yes, I'll be covering the Fortnite gravity hammer. Halo 3 was a game of many firsts. It was the first Halo game on the Xbox 360 at the time, which meant it was technically the first next-gen Halo. It was the first Halo game with armor customization, the first Halo with Forge, and so on and so on. It was also the first campaign where the elites were not an enemy the player would be fighting, due to them defecting to the human side during Halo 2. Since Halo's core combat loop is comprised of the Grunt, Jackal, and Elite triangle, a gap had opened up, and the Brutes would now need to fill this gap. Bungie used Halo 3 as an opportunity to expand and cement the identity of the Brutes, which the studio had felt was a bit vague and weak in Halo 2 due to the rush development. The Brutes were now sporting goatees and had taken on an armored-up, leather-clad monkey biker gang from space type of aesthetic, and with their new bad boy identity, came a whole host of new weapons that aesthetically matched their monkey wielders. In Halo 2, a brute by the name of Tartarus wielded a gravity-manipulating weapon called the Fist of Rucht, and while players couldn't actually use this thing, it would become the foundation for Halo 3's gravity hammer. Aesthetically, the Halo 3 gravity hammer is quite different from the Fist of Rucht, looking quite a bit like if someone took a motorcycle handlebar and shoved a weird alien engine on the end of it. It's got an incredibly imposing blade which is bolted to the head with clamps, and it's covered in neon blue lights to always remind you that this thing is a piece of Covenant technology, even if it looks like a handlebar. It's an angry, imposing thing, and if the design doesn't make you feel intimidated, then perhaps the sound will. Halo 3's gravity hammer is probably the most powerful sounding device in the game next to the Spartan laser. The gravity hammer is wielded by brute chieftains in the campaign who fill the role of the golden elites from previous games. And while the chieftains never really achieved the same level of dread that the gold elites instilled in players, the heavy and aggressive body language, as well as their endlessly entertaining quotes by Marcus Phoenix's John DiMaggio, made them a charismatic enemy to fight against.
When this is over, that hammer is going in someone's ass!
How is the hammer itself, though? The Halo 3 gravity hammer may be categorized as a melee weapon, but calling it that is such a disservice to the originality and creativity of this device. Yes, hitting somebody over the head with it will kill them, but each swing of the hammer creates a neutral gravity wave that affects not just enemies, but friendlies, objects in the environment, and the player themselves. The ways this gravity wave can be utilized is where the real fun begins. If you swing the hammer and then jump right as the gravity wave manifests, the shockwave will boost your jump height, allowing you to reach new heights not previously accessible. This isn't just for vertical jumps, by the way. It can also be used to sort of launch yourself forward a few extra feet if you're speedrunning the campaign or trying to reach an objective faster. A Griffball player by the name of Flowers invented a trick where you activate a self-launch while picking up the objective to throw you high above the enemy team so that you can hopefully make a run for the goal when you land. Flowering is an incredibly clever strategy, which can actually be combined with your ability to launch friendly players with the hammer. If you can communicate in a game of Griffball, a very classy move to pull off is when a team has someone flower themselves up into the air with the ball, and then the teammate launches them towards the goal over the enemy's head. Okay, there we go. Hey, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, that was a half-court launch right there. Like, you were on the midline and I landed, like, I could very easily just run that in. I needed to take, like, one step and it would have armed.
It's a pity that players rarely use mics nowadays, since communicated strategies like this can sometimes be the deciding factor in how a Griffball match plays out. The hammer can also be used to overturn vehicles or shuffle large physics objects around the place to block off entrances that the enemy needs, make new pathways for your team, disrupt enemy rockets and throwables, force suicide grunts to drop their grenades, bake you a cake. Okay, that last part was a lie. But what I'm trying to say is that the Halo 3 Gravity Hammer tapped into something Halo frustratingly only flirts with, giving the player a mixture of some lethal weapons, but also creative side tools that are valuable, not because of their ability to simply kill really good, but assist the player and team in supportive, disruptive, and creative ways. Halo 3's DLC map, Sandbox, even included a new variant of the hammer called the 7 Wood, which was a comedic golf club makeover for the brute weapon. The 7 Wood even sports a cute little grunt sticker right there. Moving on to Halo 3's sister game, ODST, the hammer is also featured here, unchanged outside of a damage reduction and a stronger pushback on the player to reflect the weaker stature of an ODST. All in all, the Gravity Hammer of Halo 3 is a special weapon. Its mechanical depth allows for a wide variety of gameplay possibilities, and it also allows the Griffball community to still host tournaments and organize matches to this day. Talking to a few of them in the official Griffball Discord server has been a huge help for this video, and they're always looking for more players and talent to join the Griffball community. The hammer made an excellent introduction in Halo 3, but how would the future fare for this goofy monkey wrench? With Halo Reach came a new branch of the Halo engine, one that supported more complexity and detail than the engine Halo 3 and ODST used. Many things got new, more detailed designs, made in the spirit of the original designs. The Brutes, though, had their second aesthetic makeover, this time moving away from the goatee, leather-clad monkey biker look of Halo 3, and onto something more primitive, ritualistic, and tribal. They had all their fur shaved off, and their bare skin adorned in Holy Covenant symbols and tattoos. Their Gravity Hammer also received some modifications, moving away from the manufactured motorcycle look and more towards a primal, alien weapon of strength and power. The blue sci-fi lights were replaced with deep, angry orange ones, and every swing of the hammer was assisted by a burst of flame from the head. The 7 Wood even made a return, cementing itself as a running gag for the series, and that's pretty cool. Bungie wisely kept the insanely powerful sound design of the Halo 3 hammer and actually exaggerated the visuals of the Shockwave and Reach, giving the hammer an immensely intimidating presentation. It's still utilized by Brute Chieftains, who use mostly the same AI behavior as Halo 3, but they are noticeably easier to deal with, given the sandbox of Halo Reach and the capabilities of the armor abilities. Speaking of sandbox, the Gravity Hammer's transition from Halo 3 to Reach was unfortunately a rough one, and a lot was lost. While its animations and presence may imply a stronger version of the Gravity Hammer, mechanically, it's actually quite a step back from Halo 3. A lot was lost in this iteration of the hammer. For starters, its gravity manipulating abilities were toned down with a severely nerfed range for its disruption effect, which could knock players back halfway across the court in Halo 3, but barely tickle Spartans a few feet away from the player in Halo Reach. The ability to self-launch was toned down significantly, and the ability to launch friends was all but removed. The Reach hammer is actually a sore spot for a lot of Griffball veterans due to the changes that it made to the Griffball scene. There was a lot less room for strategy and cooperation. The hammer was stripped down to be just a melee weapon. Armor abilities, of course, picked up some of the slack, with Evade being used to produce a new form of the flowers trick. But the hammer itself was sapped of a lot of its creative uses. The Reach hammer is fondly remembered in the Halo community, but I attribute this mostly due to its incredible presentation and sound design. Mechanically, it was unfortunately not what it needed to be, but with the future of Halo on the horizon, there was always room for improvement, and at least the Reach hammer looked really cool. With Halo 4 came a new art style and direction for the Halo universe, but not all was completely changed. While the Brutes themselves did not actually feature in Halo 4, their hammer most certainly did. Pre-release, there was even a big push for the Griffball scene with Halo 4.
And we worked quite a bit with the Griffball Hub people and a bunch of the other competitive Griffball teams to develop the mode, get the feel of the mode, and tuning settings just right.
Halo 4's version of the Gravity Hammer is identical to the Reach model. In fact, it is the Halo Reach model. Like many of Reach's assets that held up, such as the Wraith, Ghost, etc., 343 ported the hammer over to Halo 4 with few actual changes to the model outside of maybe some coloring differences. It did receive a faster yet slightly less impactful swing animation, but the thunderous and powerful sound effect from Halo 3 and Reach was thrown out. I'm not quite sure what happened here. Halo 4 puzzlingly threw out quite a few iconic sounds, such as the shield recharge sound effect and the plasma pistol overcharge hum. But whether you liked these new Halo 4 sound effects or not was really down to personal preference. The Halo 4 hammer, though, it wasn't just a case of the sound being different, it was a weaker sound. Really weak. You also probably noticed in that footage that the hammer also does not throw the player around anymore, which, when combined with the weak sound design, it makes the Halo 4 hammer seem dramatically weaker than previous incarnations. Which is then strange because in some ways it's actually an improvement over Reach's hammer. Halo 4 may have removed the ability to self-launch, but it brought back the ability to launch friendly players, which was absent from Reach.
And jump over my right shoulder.
Okay, alright. Whoa! Holy
There
moly.
is launching in Halo 4.
That's crazy, it goes
And one of
so
my
far.
favorites is what we call the shotgun launch. Run under me. I'm gonna jump.
Okay, here we go. I think I messed that up.
Sorry. After you run under me,
Okay,
jump.
take two.
Launches you straight forward.
What? That's so
There's
cool.
launching in Halo 4.
You may be initially shocked by the removal of the ability to self-launch, but keep in mind that now that you can launch friendly players, there's a bit of teamwork that's been brought back to this hammer that was missing in Reach's. What's a bit more divisive, though, was an issue with how the hammer was able to manipulate the griff ball when not in the player's hands. It's a good idea in theory that you can knock the griff ball out of the air and throw it around the court with the hammer, but the actual implementation of this ability seems to actually be glitched. Hitting the griff ball will send it flying in a random direction with an unpredictable momentum that the player can't actually control, which is problematic in a game where well-executed and thought-out tactics are required. On paper, the Halo 4 Gravity Hammer isn't so much an upgrade or a flat downgrade. It's a sidestep. It makes quite a few mistakes, but also corrects a few of Reach's mistakes. It may feel and sound much less powerful than Reach's hammer, but mechanically its ability to launch teammates is a welcome return. Outside of just Griffball, the hammer can be summoned via Halo 4's kill streak system in the Infinity Slayer game types, and it's even found in the campaign in Spartan Ops. In the campaign, the hammer can be found in a handful of different ways. On the level Shutdown, there's an Easter egg that can be completed that gives you access to quite a few hammers. In the final level, a gravity hammer can be found naturally along the level's path in this room here, but there's also an Easter egg that involves destroying towers that will spawn a hammer for the player upon completion at the end of the level. In the Spartan Ops mission Spartan Thorn, the player can cause characters from the internet show Red vs. Blue to dump their Griffball equipment into the map, which gives the player a plethora of free gravity hammers to goof off with. Unfortunately, the Griffball community didn't do too well in Halo 4, and the various teams and tournaments gradually shifted back to Halo 3. Despite the fall of Griffball during Halo 4's time, there are those who are fans of the Halo 4 Griffball, as Halo 4 was their introduction to the mode. It may be more chaotic, but there are those who thrive in that chaos, and in the Griffball Discord, there are still Halo 4 games and tournaments being organized and planned. Next game, though, the Gravity Hammer would need some serious, positive improvements. No more sidesteps. Halo 5 would be 343's second crack at the Halo formula on next-gen hardware, no longer bound by the simple Xbox 360. 60 frames per second? You bet. Dedicated servers? Already done. More polygons than you have cells in your body? Oh yeah. And of course, a new gravity hammer. Initially, the hammer wasn't actually in Halo 5 at launch. It had to be patched into the game in late February of 2016 alongside bomb game types like Griffball. Standard Halo content should not be arriving post-release, so this was pretty irritating back in the day. I can personally vouch for it. But when it arrived, the series would see one of the most charismatic iterations of the hammer since Halo 3. In Halo 5, the Gravity Hammer got its first dramatic facelift since Halo Reach. This hammer is one oozing with personality. For one, it's incredibly articulate and expressive, with the head of the hammer opening up to reveal the inner workings of its strange alien technology. The weapon itself has moved away from the tribal space mace of Halo Reach and 4 and onto something that resembles kind of like a car engine wrapped in leather. In Halo's universe, brute gravity hammers are something very personal to the brute who designed them. They usually vary in parts, components, and speak to the personality of the brute who fashioned it. Halo 3's Gravity Hammer reflected the biker punk nature of the Halo 3 brutes. Halo Reach's reflected the very tribal nature of Reach's brutes. And while there's no brutes in Halo 5, this hammer appears to be scavenged from a mixture of alien and human parts. Alien magnetism and gravitational technology rigged up with copper wires and human engine parts. One of my favorite details is the hammer lacks the clamps to hold the blade in place, so the brute who designed this thing improvised and used leather straps. Not only does this speak to the environment this hammer was forged in, it also means that the silhouette of the hammer is still retained with something holding the lower half of the blade in place. Halo 5's Gravity Hammer aesthetically is a cool spin on the hammer. What's even cooler is Halo 5's hammer made a serious effort to correct the mistakes of the Halo 4 hammer. The sound design, while still frustratingly lacking the same power of the Halo 3 and Reach hammer, had much more energy injected into it. The ability to self-launch was also brought back, and when stacked with Halo 5's enhanced mobility jetpacks, the player could get some serious air with this thing. Areas where the hammer fell short, unfortunately, was the removal of the ability to launch teammates, which was present in Halo 4, I should remind you. Why it was removed can really only be speculated, but sadly its absence means this hammer falls just short of being a proper return to form for the once great gravitational manipulation device. One issue that Ragemore had that was actually reflected by other Griffball players was how aiming down the sights affects melee weapons in Halo 5. ADS was a new introduction to Halo in Halo 5, and its usage on melee weapons extended their melee lunge range past what it should be normally. And this can't be disabled in custom games, which leads to a bit of messiness since the enemy melee lunge can't be dodged actually, and the enemy's max melee range is constantly in a state of flux. It's frustrating to have enemies suddenly teleporting quite a few feet ahead of them because now suddenly they can reach you farther because they aim down the sights with a hammer. Despite its issues, this version of the hammer is still held in higher regard. It may be less team-focused, but some of the gravity manipulation abilities are appreciated, seeing as they were absent in 4. Over the course of 2016, a variety of wreck gravity hammers would be added to Halo 5, which could be used by the players. Let's go over them, shall we? The Corpse Maker is a gravity hammer that has a faster swing speed and carries more energy than the standard hammer. The Grinder is a variant that creates a lethal gravity vortex that kills those caught inside and does EMP damage to the vehicles also caught inside this thing. The 7 Wood makes its brilliant return after its absence in Halo 4. It is statistically similar to the standard hammer, but with a goofy golf club sound effect per swing to complement the appearance. And finally, the Tartarus's Gavel. While not actually being the Fist of Rukt, disappointingly, the Tartarus's Gavel is quite an entertaining weapon, gifting the player with increased jump height, faster movement speed, beefier shields, and it'll spawn a series of explosions that travel ahead of the player per swing, killing anything in its path. A natural question would probably be if these wreck variants were ever used in Griffball, and the answer was no, but the reason why was quite interesting. The Griffball community experimented quite a bit, but eventually found that they just couldn't use these wreck variants of the Gravity Hammer due to their extreme lethality. Ragemore's thoughts were that it's completely understandable these things were so violent and lethal since they could be obtained in loot boxes, so they kinda had to be lethal in order to function without you feeling like you wasted your money. But he'd personally love for 343 to experiment in the future with adding less lethal variants of the Gravity Hammer with more of an emphasis on their gravity manipulation abilities, to give the Griffball community, the custom game community, and everything just more tools to work with. 343 actually mentioned that they did have the ability to re-enable player launching, but didn't during Halo 5's lifespan for whatever reason. So it is entirely possible that in the future, we could see them re-enable this and give the Gravity Hammer a proper return to form if 343 is indeed keeping tabs on what the community likes out of their Gravity Hammers. Here's to hoping we see something like this in the future. The Gravity Hammer of Halo is also featured outside of just the mainline Halo games, and I thought it would be fun to explore some of them. 2009's RTS game Halo Wars had a unit called the Brute Chieftain that sported an incredibly unique armor set that was covered in curvy spikes and sharp edges that accentuated his tusk-like teeth and gave him a very King of the Jungle type of look. His personal Gravity Hammer fit the very Apex Predator look quite well, brandishing blades and hooks that resembled sharp teeth. It's a very interesting look for the Gravity Hammer, and this brute only appeared in this game, though he did go on to actually make a little cameo appearance in a terminal for Halo 2 Anniversary, although without his distinct hammer. Halo Wars 2 featured a number of unique takes on the hammer due to it being the introduction of a brute-led faction of Ex-Covenant called the Banished. Banished Gravity Hammers vary in design. Some use repurposed Halo 3 and Reach designs. Other brutes, such as the Warlords, use custom-built hammers that resemble giant construction tools corrupted by Banished technology. The The most famous gravity hammer in the Banished belongs to the leader and founder, Atriox. When Atriox served under the Covenant, he grew tired of what he realized was imprisonment to a cause that was not his own. Those who defied the Covenant or tried to leave were executed in a holy ritual the Covenant prophets called banishing. When Atriox was sentenced to a banishing, he actually fought back, slew the banishing priest, and forged a new hammer out of the pieces of the priest's red energy sword. This new gravity mace was given the name Chainbreaker by Atriox. Chainbreaker's silhouette would go on to become the mark of the Banished faction, a statement from them that they were going to reject the Covenant, reject the prophets, and were ready to forge their own place in the universe and destroy anything that prevents them from doing so. But there's something more terrifying than Atriox's Chainbreaker. On the 11th of December, 2020, Fortnite received the surprise edition of the Master Chief. Along with the Chief came a couple of Halo goodies. One of them was a banished gravity hammer. Due to it being in the cursed Fortnite aesthetic, this version of the hammer is much softer looking, with the blades less accentuated, and the overall body taking on a more stylized and cartoonish look. All jokes aside though, this version of the gravity hammer is kinda cool. It's interesting seeing Halo in a different aesthetic, and while yes, people are memeing on this thing, I don't know, I think it's cool. It's something different. I've never seen a gravity hammer that kinda looks like this. Halo's gravity hammer is a staple of the series, and has gone through many iterations, changes, and designs, each one just as beautiful and unique as the last. It's a device that thrives off its creative concept, not being limited to being a simplistic killing tool. It's one that still has a lot of untapped potential. And with Halo Infinite having you go up against the Banished war machine in first person, it's inevitable that we're going to be seeing the gravity hammer again soon. What's your favorite version of the Halo gravity hammer? What would you like to see me cover next? Let me know down below, and I'll see you all on the next video.